It's one of the most anticipated phones of the year, for better or worse. But everyone wants to know exactly what the next version of the Galaxy has in store for us. So let's find out, because it's Josh Vergara from Android Authority. What's going on, everybody? And this is the Samsung Galaxy S5. As is the case with plenty of the updates to flagship smartphones this year, much of what you remember from previous iterations returns, and in the Galaxy S5 there are some subtle but ultimately not too significant changes. The first thing you'll notice is the shape of the phone, which takes on a very familiar form factor with the rounded corners that put together what is pretty much a flat profile all around. It'll either be too familiar or it's going to be played out, depending on who you are. Samsung's trademark button layout returns with a new and welcome change. The tactile home button with back and this time a recent apps button, which helps to provide a much more traditional experience, at least when it comes to multitasking. One thing you will notice, especially if you're a screen nut, are that the bezels around the screen are a little bit larger. Now, some of you out there will lament this change, but there is a reason for that. Samsung was going for durability in the Galaxy S5. So when this lands, if you happen to drop it on the sides, perhaps the screen is going to be a little bit more protected. And also, you also get that IP67 certification. Come around to the sides and you'll find the same button layout atop a slightly different backdrop. Now, while we did see a somewhat notebook design introduced in the Galaxy Note 3, this time around the ridges are much more pronounced and neither detract or add to the handling, because the sides, for all intents and purposes, are still flat, so the experience is largely the same. Head down to the bottom and you'll have the micro USB charging port that is now covered by a piece of plastic, another facet of that IP certification I just mentioned. When it comes to the material on the back, I will have to say that I'm not the biggest fan of this perforated design, primarily because we already had a great faux leather offering that was introduced in the Note series. So for some people out there, and somewhat myself, I do find this to be a little bit of a step backward. But anyway, when it comes to the back, you have that cover, but up here you have the ISOCELL, the new ISOCELL camera, and also the addition of the heart rate monitor. Ultimately, however, looks are one thing. Handling is a whole different story. And in that regard, I have to give Samsung some credit because they believe in their design, and if it ain't broke, they don't necessarily have to fix it. The size of the phone, even with the 5.1-inch screen, is still highly accessible, as it is only marginally larger than its predecessor. If you were a fan of the handling experience of the Galaxy S4, you get largely the same deal here. It's an aspect of the phone that always strikes me first, the ease of use in one hand and the ability to reach most places on the screen because of the ergonomics. So if the looks of the phone are going to lose some points, maybe it redeems itself by having a form factor that is ultimately familiar, meaning that the learning curve on the Galaxy S5 is really not all that steep at all. Samsung continues its tradition of Super AMOLED displays by bumping up its size by 0.1 inches, and pretty much everything you may expect from this 1080p resolution screen with 432 pixels per inch is here in the Galaxy S5 display. Highly vibrant colors do justice to the updated version of TouchWiz, as colors basically pop out and punch you in the face. This kind of vibrancy is eye-catching to be sure, but can be toned down if you wish them to be. Viewing angles are as good as ever, allowing you to see elements clearly even in steep angles. And pretty much any and all media you're going to watch through this display shines through, so fire up games like Plants vs. Zombies 2 and enjoy yourself. Worth mentioning is the screen's ability to register touches from fingers even when you're using gloves, along with its ability to recognize a hovering finger for AirView capabilities. In performance, as is the case with all of the flagship updates this year, the Samsung Galaxy S5 sports the basically required processing package. The Snapdragon 801 clocked in at 2.5 GHz and backed by the Adreno 330 and 2 GB of RAM. Often we see comments regarding stutter and lag on Samsung Galaxy devices, but while they may have been occasional in the past, I would use the term seldom for this one. Credit can be given to the updated and thus optimized new version of TouchWiz, in which I only really find delays in the My Magazine area when it is trying to refresh the online content. Especially with the slew of tools available in the new version of TouchWiz, getting work and play done shouldn't be an issue, and thankfully, the phone is powerful enough to even handle all of those tools. IP67 means that the S5 is dust-proof and can be under 1 meter of water for 30 minutes. And after splashing it about in my tests, the phone bounced right back and was responsive. I didn't even have much trouble with the water registering presses on the screen, as can be an issue with other water-resistant phones. And all of that protection helps keep safe a number of features that range from ultimately useful to maybe useful sometimes. Because, at the very least, under that back cover you have access to that removable battery and also to the expandable storage using the micro SD card slot. An IR Blaster allows you to control your TVs and set-top boxes in an app that helps you find the best content on TV. And the sensors within the phone help with various functions like the S-Health pedometer and the air gestures, all of which make their return in the S5. Call quality on the T-Mobile network yielded few problems. No calls were dropped and neither side of the call complained about the sound quality. And speaking of sound quality, the speaker of the Galaxy S5 is still relegated to the backside portion and mostly retains the experience of before, with a pretty one-dimensional sound and a lack of volume. While it is possible to mess with the settings in order to achieve a slightly better sound, overall, the Galaxy S5 speaker just pales in comparisons to any of its competitors that have front-facing speakers. The main additions when it comes to the hardware are the heart rate monitor and the finger scanner, both of which are covered in feature-focused videos, but here's the gist. The heart rate monitor does add another layer to the S-Health Fold, but unless you're only looking for a snapshot of your heart rate from time to time, the single readings possible by the S5's HRM won't prove useful for anyone truly passionate about fitness. And while the finger scanner does add another level of security to the S5, I found it a little more bothersome than anything, adding to the time it takes for me to get into the phone. Perhaps when it is given more functionality than basically just unlocking the phone, I would use it much more. At the time of filming all of the B-roll for this video, I was using the phone pretty extensively, obviously, especially since I was taking it out for a camera shootout, so here is what my usage looked like once the battery hit 50%. So the average user will get longevity from this phone, while power users might be reaching for the power cord just in time for bed. And the ultra power saving mode might be your saving grace, as you are able to strip the phone experience to its monochromatic bare bones, limiting you to only some apps and settings at the benefit of having much more longevity. Now, one of the biggest additions to the Galaxy S5 is the new ISOCELL camera, an optic package that brings 16 megapixels of power and new technology to isolate pixels for higher quality photos. But if you don't need to hear the technical jargon, perhaps the quality may speak for itself. First, we'll talk about the app, which takes on the more circle-centric motif of the updated TouchWiz look, while dialing it back on some of the features that were originally introduced in the Galaxy S4 and then adding in a few new ones. It's a pretty simple app to use at first glance, as auto mode will get you where you need to go. But open up that settings menu and you'll see all that you can tweak in a long scrolling menu. Live HDR affords you the ability to see through the viewfinder the effect HDR would have on your shot. It's useful if you aren't sure how HDR would affect the scene, and when you use it right, it can really enhance an otherwise jarringly contrasty photo. Selective focus is Samsung's way of adding some style to your photos. With the mode on, you can focus on your main subject, and then the camera will take multiple photos and process them together. The processing time is a little long, but if done right, you can play around with the resulting image. And while at times it will do its job well and yield you the choice of foreground, background, or everything in focus, it can be a hit or miss at times. When the software is unable to draw a perfect line between subjects, you'll notice as a portion of the picture will be blurred because it wasn't processed properly. In the end, ISOCELL seems to do the trick as far as quality goes, at first yielding photos with great color saturation and pretty good detail at first glance. The details are captured pretty well, as a number of photos show good sharpness even after zooming in, but this is not true for every photo. Lowering the overall lighting conditions will exacerbate this, which comes as little surprise, but the camera does continue to get some decent shots even in those less than ideal situations. So with a slew of features and settings at its disposal, the ISOCELL camera proves to be a worthy companion for anyone that wants to get even just a little bit more out of their smartphone photography. And we finally make it to software, in which we see an updated version of TouchWiz, one that might not be as drastic an update as many hoped, but still manages to somewhat add to the formula. At first glance, TouchWiz seems like the same old. You have the very colorful home screens and also the app drawer, which is still a paginated layout horizontally, but then you'll see an addition in the home screens when you move left, and it is called the My magazine. While it is supposed to be a news aggregator, it does piggyback off of Flipboard, but not to the extent you might like. Even casual users of Flipboard, which is still a very powerful and stylish news application, will not be happy to know that their own setup notifications don't filter through the My Magazine screen. Instead, it pulls from a curated list of categorical offerings and then your social media outlets. More freedom of choice would have helped the My Magazine, which ultimately becomes a shortcut to parts of Flipboard that you probably don't use. Pull down that notification dropdown and you're going to see how the circles comprise the power widget. And when you bring it down to see all of the features available in your S5, you'll find that signature long list of particular toggles. Now, many of these will be familiar, but one worth mentioning is the toolbox, a small floating button which is much like a chat head that provides a quick shortcut to up to 5 different favorited apps. After that, we also have a download booster, which allows TouchWiz to download files larger than 30 megabytes using both your Wi-Fi and mobile data connection. It works extremely well, but don't get carried away or you'll use up all your data in no time. And all of these are found in a completely revamped settings menu that has taken on that circle motif as well. All options are also quite elegantly categorized in pull downs, making it easy to find what you're looking for. After that, much of what you may remember returns, like every gesture you may or may not use, the multi-window, and apps like S-Health, which was updated mainly to accommodate the heart rate monitor. What strikes me most about this updated version of TouchWiz is the fact that it's actually pretty smooth, and I found the performance to be actually quite good. The only thing that I'm really sick of when it comes to TouchWiz are the noises that it makes. All of those little noises that we've had since the Galaxy S2 are really played out, but those subtle changes that you find in here do afford it a little bit of freshness, at least until it doesn't feel fresh anymore. And after that, it pretty much comes down to TouchWiz being a little bit too familiar for its own good. But at least, it's pretty snappy, and it's still pretty reliable. The Galaxy S5 will be available for all the major carriers soon at the premium prices for their 2-year contracts, usually $199 in the States. Expect unlocked versions of the phone to range close to the $700 mark. And so, there you have it, the Samsung Galaxy S5. Now, a lot of you out there are probably not going to look at this phone as a proper upgrade. And how do I know that? Well, it's because you've sounded off on it already. And in quite a few ways, they're probably right. Some additions like the heart rate monitor or even the finger scanner still don't feel ultimately useful to me, and will probably sit in that Samsung bag of tricks marked Galaxy Syndrome, which includes a number of other features from previous iterations. It also might not be the best looking phone out, as for some it seems too similar to its predecessor, while perhaps somewhat regressing with its material choice. But for every finger scanner, there's an ISOCELL camera. For every design choice you may not like, there is now IP certification. And for every point lost for being unoriginal, there are points for familiarity. Half of you will like this phone, the other half will not. That's the reality of the Galaxy at this point. But there is one thing for certain. You probably know what it is you want. And if what the Galaxy S5 offers fits into your needs, then guess what? You're probably going to love this device. And for everyone else out there, we do have the benefit of quite a few other choices in the smartphone game. But as far as the Galaxy S5 goes, I would encourage you to still give it a try and see for yourself. Stay tuned to Android Authority for all of the best coverage, from our reviews to our comparisons to all of our future coverage of these flagship devices. Drop us likes on our videos because we love to see those thumbs up, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And when you're done with all of that, head on over to AndroidAuthority.com for even more in-depth coverage, because we are your source for all things Android.